Hi historians, today we are going to do Unit 2, Note 6 on the Texas Annexation. Okay, so taking a look at this map, you can see by 1820, this whole white area is what the United States owns as land. Okay, they had just the year before purchased or made a treaty with Spain to gain Florida. And so now all of this land to the west over here is owned by is called Mexico, but it's controlled by Spain. Spain was still colonizing in this area. And up here, this spot is the United States wants it, but Britain does too, so we're going to deal with that later. All right. In 1821, a man named Stephen Austin, his father, had died. He left him with a large piece of land that he had obtained from Spain. Austin was given permission by the Spanish officials to start an American colony in Spanish Texas. So Spain gave this chunk of land to Stephen Austin's father in order for him to begin a colony. Okay, he promised to choose only honest and hardworking settlers to bring to his colony. Okay. Stephen Austin was about to make his father's dreams a reality. American settlers had big plans for this colony. On your map, would you please shade in this chunk of land in a different color? I chose red. You can choose whatever color you want. And then let's write in our notes that this area starts as a Spanish colony. Spain controlled Mexico. They allowed the United States they allowed U.S. citizen Stephen Austin to move into the territory and begin a colony to settle in Spanish Texas. So Stephen Austin started a colony of Americans in Texas. Many Americans felt that Texas was valuable because much of the region was perfect for growing the South's most valuable crop, cotton. Cotton takes a lot of nutrients from the soil, so many plantation owners were looking for more land where cotton would grow. Many Americans felt that Texas would be a great addition to the United States someday. Okay. Leave room down here. We're going to add something else down here later, but I want you to write down in this area, the box for the Texas annexation, I want you to write down that settlers wanted more land for growing cotton. By the time Stephen Austin and his settlers arrived, though, some things had changed. Mexico had declared their independence from Spain. Spain no longer owns that property. Mexico now controlled the region where Austin's colony was going to be located. The new Mexican government wanted Austin's colony to respect Mexico, and it made him promise that the settlers would become Mexican citizens and join the Catholic Church. So no freedom of religion. You got to be what they tell you to be. Stephen Austin agreed to Mexico's terms, and by 1827, nearly 300 families had come to live in the Mexican state of Texas. News of the successful colony spread. By 1830, there were over 25,000 Americans living in Texas. Now, the Americans living in Texas greatly outnumbered the Tejanos, the Texans who were from Mexico. So now there's more white people than the Texans. Tensions began to rise between those two groups eventually, especially after Mexico banned slavery in 1829, but the people living here wanted to keep slavery, and Mexico says no slavery. Okay. The Tejanos were not happy that so many American settlers had come to Texas. They felt that Austin's colony had grown too large. The settlers did not become Mexican citizens as Stephen Austin had promised. Mexico responded by closing Texas, saying no more immigration, you can't come here. Troops from Mexico's armies arrived to guard the border and enforce Mexico's laws. This angered the American settlers. So the Mexican territory, Mexico declared its independence from Spain, and then they closed Texas to further immigration because the Americans, people that were coming in to settle there, were not abiding by Mexico's laws, and so they said, well, you don't get to come here then. With tensions rising between the American settlers and the Tejanos, Stephen Austin traveled to Mexico City to meet with Mexico's leader. Mexico's leader at this time is a man named Santa Anna. Okay. So this was in 1833, and he just wants to request that Mexico make Texas a separate Mexican state. Just make us our own state, and then let us make some of our own rules. Mexico's power-hungry dictator, Santa Anna, had Austin thrown in jail. So he's in jail for about 2 years. In 1835, after Austin was released, Texas revolted. Santa Anna marched north with 6,000 troops. Excuse me, determined to crush the rebellion. In February of 1836, Santa Anna's army arrived near the city of San Antonio, Texas. The Texas Army had left 180 volunteers to defend the town while they went ahead to prepare for the upcoming battles. The defenders took refuge in the old Spanish mission building called the Alamo. Santa Anna demanded that every Texan surrender or expect no mercy. The defenders replied by firing their cannon at Santa Anna and his army. Messengers were sent to nearby towns to try and get help, but it doesn't go well. So let's define Santa Anna. He's the dictator of Mexico, leader of the Mexican army. Okay. Reinforcements never arrived. The defender of the Alamo fought the Mexican troops with guns and cannons for 12 days. On March 6th, 1836, Santa Anna ordered his men to storm the fort. The battle also lasted 19 minutes. Santa Anna ordered every one of the town's defenders to be executed. When word reached the Texas Army, led by Sam Houston, the Texans were filled with rage over Santa Anna's brutality. So they left no survivors. This is the 13-day battle in San Antonio that led to no survivors. So there's this video, I can link it up in our Google Classroom. So Sam Houston led the Texas Army deeper into Texas to make it more difficult for Santa Anna to resupply and to keep his army ready. His plan worked. When the Texas Army lured Santa Anna to the San Jacinto River, Santa Anna marched his troops through the night, expecting Texas to attack at dawn. When there was no attack, he and his troops sat down and got some rest, and he fell asleep. Houston's troops staged a surprise attack later in the afternoon while they were napping. They were having a little siesta, and they yelled, "Remember the Alamo." So let's define Sam Houston as the commander of the Texas Revolution Army. Excuse me. The Texas Army won at the Battle of San Jacinto. Santa Anna fled but was captured the next day. In exchange for his release, he's forced to sign a treaty that recognized Texas as an independent nation and ordered all Mexican troops out of Texas. So he's supposed to leave. Okay. Texas revolted and won independence from Mexico. So I need you to understand that this is not the United States fighting a war against Mexico in this instance. This is the people who had moved in to start a different colony in what was Spanish Texas. But then Spain lost the battle for independence and Mexico won their independence from Spain. Mexico controlled that. So the Texans began an uprising and a rebellion, a revolt against Mexico, the Texans. Some of them had been Americans who moved into that region, but at that point, once they moved into that region to colonize there, they were not living in the United States. They were living in a part of Mexico. So this is basically like a civil war, a war of independence that Texas is fighting to win its independence from Mexico. It's not the United States fighting it, although there were some people who came from the United States to help because they believed in the Texans' right to have independence. Excuse me. So Santa Anna never fully accepted the loss of Texas as a territory. He still considered Texas to be part of Mexico, even though the Texas Army had beaten him. But Texas was now an independent country, formally called the Texas Republic. Okay, but they nicknamed it the Lone Star Republic, and they elected Sam Houston to be their leader. Okay. Most Texans were Americans, and they hoped that Texas would become part of the United States. Southerners wanted Texas to be a slave state. Northerners who opposed slavery fought a long time to keep Texas from joining the United States. Texas remained its own country, an independent country, for 10 years until they pretty much begged the United States. It's expensive to become your own country, so they ultimately beg the United States to annex them or add them on. Okay, in 1845, under the President James K. Polk, Texas was admitted as the 28th state. So this is President of the U.S. He annexed Texas. And then here in your notes, it becomes a U.S. state. After much debate, Texas was annexed by the United States and entered the country as another slave state. So now you're starting to see that the balance of the number of states that are free states versus the number of states that are slave states is going to start to fluctuate back and forth. And the slave states are going to want to continue adding more states that allow slavery. The free states are going to want to continue adding more states that oppose slavery or abolish it. And this struggle is going to continue until you can kind of guess that ultimately, in about 20 years, there's going to be a civil war. So although the Texans had fought a war with Santa Anna to win their independence, excuse me, the United States gained the Texas annexation through a peaceful treaty with the Texas Republic. Okay, so the Texans fought a war, but the United States did not fight this war to gain this. We signed a peaceful treaty, okay? And that's how we gained this Texas annexation. We added on to our country peacefully. They fought for their independence. We added on peacefully. Okay, the U.S. was not done fulfilling its vision for manifest destiny. Meanwhile, Santa Anna refused to recognize that Texas was no longer a part of Mexico. This is going to come in very important in our next set of notes, because his failure to recognize Texas as an independent country is going to cause issues. He's going to think that the border between the United States and Mexico is much further north than we recognize, and that's going to cause some issues. And it will ultimately lead to a different war between the U.S. and Mexico. Just remember that the Texas annexation is a peaceful annexing of this property, this land, from the independent Republic of Texas. Okay, and Santa Anna promises that this isn't over. All right, so this is should be what we have filled in our notes for this set of notes. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk more about this